Midnight Madness sale is Wednesday only. I can't afford to miss it. Hey, how about dinner on Thursday?
Well, okay, but Thursdays we just usually have turkey.
Turkey?
Highland's pre-Thanksgiving Midnight Madness sale from noon to midnight Wednesday only. It's worth the trip.
Channel 2, KPRC-TV. This is The Scene at 5 with Ron Stone, Doug Johnson, and the Channel 2 News team.
We're in the Sam Houston Coliseum. I'm Ron Stone. Doug Johnson. Ron Regan is with us. Catherine Smith is up in Dallas. We'll visit her in just a few moments. We were talking about this building, and this is the last place John Kennedy made a major speech. We've seen all kinds of things in this place over our years, have we not?
When we were little, when we were big.
You remember where you were, Ron Regan, when John Kennedy was killed?
Yeah, like a lot of kids at that time. I was in school. I was in the 5th grade, and I can remember when they came across the school loud system and announced that the president had been shot. We didn't know the status at that point, and we were let out of school, and it was you could feel it. At 10 years old, you knew, you were certainly old enough to know that something terrible had happened to the nation.
All of this that comes back to us now, Doug, reminds us of that thing that we've grappled with for a long time as to whether there was a conspiracy involved in the whole thing.
Oh, yes.
It's hard to believe anybody could just do that.
Isn't it funny, too, that the discussions keep going on?
Yeah, it's like Lincoln, though, I suppose, after all these years, people still aren't sure about that, where they're not sure that could have happened the way it did. We will devote most of our program today to John Kennedy's last days on this earth. He spent his last afternoon in Houston, and part of the last evening he made a speech here, and then he went on to Dallas, and we'll come back and show you some excerpts of that speech, talk about why he was here. And Ron Regan has a special that he is going to do with another fellow who was in the hall 25 years ago tonight and was extremely excited about his particular role that night. Doug's going to have our weather forecast, but right now let's go up to Catherine Smith, who is in Dealey Plaza in Dallas. Catherine, what's happening in Dallas today?
Ron, no official commemorations of this assassination anniversary, but right now people continue to wander here across the grassy knoll. Many have left mementos throughout the day, like behind me a small American flag stuck into the dirt. Some have even laid flowers in the street where John F. Kennedy was shot. They have come and they have gathered here much as they did 25 years ago. President and Mrs. Kennedy's visit to Dallas had started with such promise. At the airport, they were welcomed by exuberant crowds. And as their motorcade wound its way through downtown, the cheering continued. It was an outpouring of warmth far from what anyone had expected. Dallas was not Kennedy country. The Democrats were in trouble here. Just a month before, an angry mob had spit on Adlai Stevenson when he visited the city. On November 22nd, police thought they had all the troublemakers under control. All except for a young man hidden away in a corner window of the Texas School Book Depository. The Texas School Book Depository is now the Dallas County Administration Building. Every year, thousands of people from around the world make what is almost a pilgrimage here. They come to reflect and to remember. They stand on Elm Street and point to the 6th floor, reliving that day 25 years ago.
I was a junior in high school at the time, and you know, kids are impressionable and stuff, and you don't know if the Russians were coming over the hill at the next minute or who did it, and watching teachers cry and things of that nature. You know, it was something you obviously never forget.
But many in Dallas wanted to forget. It was unfair, but Dallas became the city America loved to hate.
It certainly could have happened in any city, and Dallas certainly was not to blame, but it was blamed, and many times even today it is blamed. So I think it's a natural response of Dallasites to simply just want it to go away. 25 years later, the wound has healed. Dallasites have come to grips with history. Most support what is called the 6th floor exhibit. It will be a museum dedicated to the life and presidency of John F. Kennedy.
I think it should be preserved. I think it's a great idea to have a museum to show the kids what it was like 25 years ago. And how serious it is to have a president shot.
Whether Dallas likes it or not, the people will continue to come. Like Ford's Theater in Washington or the Gettysburg Battlefield, this corner of Dallas now belongs to history.
Makes me feel very uneasy for some reason. There's something sinister about it for some reason. Makes me uncomfortable in a strange way. I don't know why. Yeah, I kind of have mixed feelings. It's a little bit morbid, I think, in some ways, coming here, all these people crowding around and buying postcards and such, but the mystery is incredible. It's just one of the great, it's a great murder mystery, really, whether it just happens to be the president.
Most here now agree that 25 years later, it is appropriate and the right thing to do to end all the controversy about the old Texas School Book Depository and open the 6th floor to the public. Ron, that museum, simply called the 6th floor exhibit, is scheduled to open President's Day next year, February 20th.
All right, Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Smith from Neely Plaza in Dallas, where people gathered today to mark for the assassination. Doug and I were both doing television in Houston at that time, though not at KPRC. You were at KPRC, yeah. I was at another station. And we didn't do anything for 4 days. We just reported on the air, but the networks carried the whole day. You remember having to do anything during the assassination?
Just watched and listened with awe and surprise and shock and love, I suppose you could say. It was beautifully done.
I think I really believe it was the finest thing television has ever done.
It was their finest hour.
And because they responded to the tragedy in such a way, and people were riveted to television for those days. Well, we're looking back at 25 years ago when John Kennedy died in Dallas, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what brought him to Houston and to Texas and ultimately to Dallas in the first place.
At that time, I was sewing a dress for my daughter when I heard it on the TV. It's still quite a sad thing to know that he was assassinated.
A formal statement from the Men's Warehouse.
Some of us get our tuxedos for free. Others pay over $300. You could rent one for $50 if you don't mind wearing someone else's clothing. Or at the Men's Warehouse, you could buy this wool tuxedo for...
I thought it was over for me.
I'm going to the drugstore.
I don't know who was more scared, me or Fred. He took off to the Yucca drugstore. Bob, the pharmacist, called my doctor. Had his name and my prescription in his computer. Bob and I go way back. But that day he brought my pills. I've never been happier to see him.
To an Eckerd pharmacist, nothing's more important than your health.
For many older people, the TV has become little more than a glorified radio. Nothing wrong with their sets, it's their eyesight. If your viewing's hazy and out of focus, it may not be your reception. You may have cataracts. Call the Cataract Institute for an exam. If you qualify, transportation is provided, and treatment is quick, safe, and even cost-free. Turn up the volume on your vision. You'll love your new viewing even after the set's turned off. I'm Dr. Kenneth Ray. For cost-free cataract surgery, call the Cataract Institute of Texas today.
Do you know why more Texans drive this car than any other car in its class? It's the Ford Taurus. It's America's award winner. And now, the 1989 Taurus comes with cash back and option package discounts that can save you up to $100. That's why in Texas, the Ford Taurus is the best-selling car in its... And your Ford dealers are winning Texas over.
Win only the best will do. Texas Ford and you.
History has forgotten the fact that John Kennedy in 1963 was not particularly the most popular man who had occupied the White House. He had promised to do some things he had not. He had had some trouble at home. He'd had some trouble overseas. And there was some question as to whether he might have some trouble getting himself reelected as President of the United States. He needed Texas to make sure that happened. And that's why he came, for no other reason. Politically, John Kennedy came to Texas to shore up the Democratic Party here so that it could propel him to a second term in the White House. That is why he came, and that's what brought him to this building 25 years ago. John Kennedy was no stranger to Texas when he arrived here that November. In 1960, he had stumped the state, appearing with his Texan running mate and delivering fiery speeches like this one on September 12th.
Everyone who wants to stand still, everyone who wants to look back, everyone who feels that everything that could be done has been done, that the best government is that which does not govern. They should vote for a system like that. But we think differently. We want to move ahead.
Though JFK aide Dave Powers called that Houston speech the best Kennedy ever gave, John Kennedy did not carry Houston or Dallas in the 1960 election. But he didn't give up on Houston, and he came back here in 1962 to issue the challenge that put a man on the moon.
I think it's most appropriate that this Space Center should be located here in Houston, here at Rice University. A city which has been identified with progress in this state and country. So we come here today to see what is being planned for the future, because from this place in America are going to be laid the plans and the designs which will reach out in this decade and put Americans on the moon and bring them back again.
Now Kennedy was in Houston to defend his pet space program and to patch up the badly divided state Democratic Party. The crowd at the Coliseum was responsive, but outside there were pickets. And worse than that, the next day's Houston Chronicle would publish a poll which showed JFK behind Barry Goldwater in Texas. But Congressman Albert Thomas saw otherwise.
We Texans will take him to our hearts again come next November. This great leader will go down in history as one of the greatest men the United States has produced. Fellow Texans, the President of the United States.
Kennedy characteristically spoke of the future on that last night of his life.
Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions, the Bible tells us. And where there is no vision, the people perish. Albert Thomas is old enough to dream dreams and young enough to see visions. He sees an America of the future in the lifetime of us all, with 300 million people living in this country with a $2 trillion economy, which will happen in this century. Even more important, he sees an America, as do we all, strong in science and in space, in health and in learning, in the respect of its neighbors and all nations. An America that is both powerful and peaceful, with a people that are both prosperous and just. With that vision, we shall not perish, and we cannot fail.
The thing I remember about John Kennedy's last night on Earth was the frustration of the Houston police force and their relief when he finally left town for Fort Worth. Kennedy stayed here in the old Rice Hotel. The Houston Police Department swept the floor where the party was to stay. They checked it, they double-checked it, and no one was on that floor, no one. But 5 minutes after Kennedy got into his room, a drunk woman was spotted walking down the hall. Where she came from, how she got there, no one knows. In the press club that night, we talked about the fact that if a drunk woman could breach that kind of security, then there really was no way to protect the president. And the next day, we were proven right. I remember going back into that Rice Hotel a few days later in what was called the old Capitol Club, and Percy Foreman was the biggest lawyer in the city of Houston, maybe in the country at that time. And he used to hold court for young reporters and young lawyers, and he'd sit around, have his drink, and we'd sit back in awe and listen.
Hang on every word.
And Percy said, you have to believe that one person killed the president. You have to believe that. It's true. But he said nobody will. They will insist on a conspiracy, because to believe that one person could kill the president is to believe that one person could kill you anytime you wanted to. Took a sip of his scotch and sat down, and I thought, okay, I'm going to believe in a conspiracy from now on, because I don't want to think it could happen. But I don't know. Have you decided about the conspiracy thing?
Well, no, but I think all of us probably have. We just don't talk about it too much. And if stopped on the street, it's like the UFOs. Do you believe in a conspiracy? Your first answer is no, but you have to wonder, don't you? Don't you? You and I have never really talked about it.
No, we never have. I believe Oswald did it, believed it very firmly until My wife and I were watching television the other night. We saw a program that absolutely convinced me he couldn't have had, you know. And so then I wondered. Well, in just a moment, we're going to come back to the Coliseum and then go back 25 years to meet a man who was here and very excited to see he was going to play ruffles and flourishes for the Waltrip High School band when John Kennedy walked in. Stay with us.
I remember exactly where I was. I was in 10th grade in high school. I was sitting in geometry class when announcement came over the intercom that the president had been shot.
That last night of John Kennedy's life, more than 3,000 people were here. And Ron Regan is in the seats right over there where the Waltrip High School band was. Ron?
Ron, there were a lot of politicians here that evening, but sitting right out here in these seats was the Waltrip High School band, as you mentioned, standing by and waiting for its cue. And there was one trumpet player waiting for his moment in the spotlight.
Precious memory, wrapped in a young man's proudest moment. The trumpet you hear is being played by a 17-year-old Houston boy. "25 years later, Chuck Blank remembers the night he played for his president.
Throughout my life, a trivia question has developed on, do you know who the last trumpet player was that played Hail to the Chief and Ruffles and Flourishes for President Kennedy? And most people will guess Al Hurt, Doc Severson, Miles Davis, Chuck Mangione, these kind of people. And then they hear it was a guy named Chuck Blank. It really startles some people and brings things to their, like, you know, you got to be kidding.
It's the kind of story you tell your children.
Oh my gosh, I've heard it at least about 300 times. I mean, it just never stops. He thinks that, I mean, every time he tells it, he thinks that it's just like, I'm just going to be as interested every time.
No one noticed Chuck Blank that night, but up there at the head table, everybody saw Senator Ralph Yarborough. Today, Yarborough downplays the rift in the party. That was one reason why Kennedy came to Texas.
Well, if he'd thought this rift needed settling, you mean between Connally and myself, he'd have called Connally to Washington, the White House, and honored him being in the White House and see what his version was, what mine was, and see what necessary to settle. He'd have wasted things on little trivia like that. That's trivia.
A lot of other things all about Kennedy as it went along.
And County Commissioner Squatty Lyons has a photo album filled with his own memories of that night.
Ron, it was tension for this reason. Most of us had never been associated with the guarding of a president, and there we were put right in the big middle of it, and I got a kick out of looking around trying to pick out who were the plainclothes men that were there as guards for the president. And you could pick out some, but many of them, of course, you couldn't. But I got a kick out of doing that. I've been very interested in law enforcement all my life, and I like to try to pick out, let me see, who is the fuzz?
All who were here remember Kennedy's last night a little differently. No one will ever forget.
We were just excited as a group of young kids to be there and something neat that was going on that time in Houston.
He was a consummate politician in knowledge of how to use governmental power.
As I recall, it was real fine get-together, and everybody just seemed happy as they could be.
And one generation's memories are another's history.
To think that, you know, you see the pictures of him and you just think, well, he was famous back then and he was, you know, a good president and stuff, and to think that, you know, your dad was just like there and he saw him, you know, it seems like such a long time ago.
And for all of those people who were sitting out here that evening, what happened the next day was perhaps even more painful after just seeing a vibrant young president the night before. Ron?
Thank you, Ron Regan. Doug Johnson's going to have our weather forecast. He's got news on the tropical storm. And maybe he'll tell us what Turkey Day is going to be like around these parts. We'll see you in just a moment. Stay with us.
I was 6 years old, the first one in the family to see it on television, and I saw Kennedy shot. And he made a big impression on me when I was 6. He was my favorite president, of course.
Is doing.
Keith is situated out on the Gulf of Mexico, but seems to be committed to the Florida coastline, right around Tampa, maybe just a little bit to the south. And those are the latest coordinates. And it seems to be picking up some speed, so it's not going to spend all day Thanksgiving in that area. It will have exited and moved out into the Atlantic by that time, and hopefully after that affect only the shipping lanes. As far as our weather is concerned, we're expecting pretty good conditions. Nice, cool night last night, warming up into the upper 60s today, and a long way from records, but we'll be approaching those a little bit later on. In fact, maybe by Thanksgiving Day, it'll be up to close to 80 degrees. 60s right now in the area, and our satellite map is indicating very little cloud cover in the state of Texas. You can see a little bit of it out in the Gulf of Mexico, not as much as yesterday. Trough or line of low pressure moving through West Texas, high pressure building behind that, and a little storm system may be coming in here sometime this weekend. But in the meantime, prepare yourself for a very fine Thanksgiving coming up.
Good.
Forecast calling for partly cloudy skies, no chance of rain tomorrow. Just a little bit as we get into Friday, but I wouldn't count on a whole lot of it. But look at that, 80 degrees on Thanksgiving, and maybe not quite so warm with a chance of rain on Friday. But there will be people in the United States digging snow to get to the turkey table, just wishing they had a little bit of our weather.
Well, we got it good, and we're happy about that. Speaking of happy birthday to F.M. Thomas Sr., who is 98 years young today.
And also happy birthday to Rosita Piyutnat. She is 88 today.
Happy birthdays to Otto and Ethel Cherry. There they are. Otto turned 94 yesterday, and Ethel turned 90 today, she said.
Well, they did that, you know, so they could remember the birthdays.
That's it.
Bob Pendleton is celebrating his 85th birthday, and that's in Pasadena. Whole of Pasadena.
And Lou Caskey, who is 101 years young, still plays domino games in East Texas, and we say happy birthday to him, and you got one more.
Aline Boudreau, pictured right here, turned 90. I bet she can make the best gumbo in the world.
We are talking about John Kennedy today and Camelot. Camelot was a myth, an especially tragic story of good ideas gone bad. King Arthur, Jack Kennedy, and Guinevere, Jackie, gathered the best young knights around them and sent them out on a quest for the Holy Grail, goodness. In the end, the search for goodness was overcome by the realities of war, and the legend ended with nothing working out except the dream. That's all that remains. It's the quest that counts. Good night, neighbors.
So, I hear the new phone system is going to be this Plexar, huh? Right. I like the financials on it. There's no capital investment or maintenance fees. It's cheap to change.
We had your ledgers at heart, Todd.
Oh, yeah?
Dave, this Plexar won't be here in the building?
No, it's a service. It does what a PBX does, but the hardware's at the phone company.
Oh, so Bill won't be able to spill coffee on it.
I said I was sorry about your copier.
Well, tell them.
It's not too good to be true. It's Plexar from Southwestern Bell Telephone.
It's here. The all-new Mazda MPV. It's here. The 7-passenger room of a wagon. The versatility of a van with the performance of a Mazda. It's here. The 1989 Mazda MPV. Waiting for your family to get here and drive it away.
See Charlie Thomas Mazda, Bob Marco Mazda, J. Marks Mazda, and Seafeld Mazda.
I'm Saul Fessman, president of Queen City Home Healthcare. I'd like to tell you about a medical product that is very effective and may be at no cost to you. This is the seat lift chair that is also a recliner. It is being used by thousands of people who suffer from severe arthritis as a form of treatment in their homes. Best of all, if you qualify, you could receive this chair at no cost. Here's how. You must have a qualifying condition such as severe arthritis or other diseases which makes the chair a medically necessary treatment. You must be enrolled in Medicare Part B and have a Medicare co-insurance policy which covers the Medicare deductible and co-payment. Many people suffer from arthritis and cannot get up from a seated position. This chair will give them the freedom to get around and help them avoid falls and injuries. So if you're a Medicare recipient and you meet the previous conditions, then you can get this recline and lift chair delivered to your door at no cost. Call 1-800-950-9500 toll-free. 1-800-950-9500.
Channel 2, KPRC-TV, Houston.
That he is going to do with another fellow who was in the hall 25 years ago tonight and was extremely excited about his particular role that night. Doug's going to have our weather forecast, but right now let's go up to Catherine Smith, who is in Dealey Plaza in Dallas. Catherine, what's happening in Dallas today?
Ron, no official commemorations of this assassination anniversary, but right now people continue to wander here across the grassy knoll. Many have left mementos throughout the day, like behind me a small American...
Oh, yes.
It's hard to believe anybody could just do that.
Isn't it funny, too, that the discussions keep going on?
Yes, it's like Lincoln, though, I suppose, after all these years, people still aren't sure about that, where they're not sure that could have happened the way it did. We will devote most of our program today to John Kennedy's last days on this earth. He spent his last afternoon in Houston, and part of the last evening he made a speech here, and then he went on to Dallas, and we'll come back and show you some excerpts of that speech, talk about why he was here. And Ron Regan has a special...
This is The Scene at 5 with Ron Stone, Doug Johnson, and the Channel 2 News team.
We're in the Sam Houston Coliseum. I'm Ron Stone. Doug Johnson. Ron Regan is with us. Catherine Smith is up in Dallas. We'll visit her in just a few moments. We were talking about this building, and this is the last place John Kennedy made a major speech. We've seen all kinds of things in this place over our years, haven't we not?
When we were little, when we were big.
Midnight Madness sale is Wednesday only. I can't afford to miss it. Hey, how about dinner on Thursday?
Well, okay, but Thursdays we just usually have turkey.
Turkey?
Highland's pre-Thanksgiving Midnight Madness sale from noon to midnight Wednesday only. It's worth the trip.
Channel 2, KPRC-TV.
You remember where you were, Ron Regan, when John Kennedy was killed?
Yeah, like a lot of kids at that time. I was in school. I was in the 5th grade, and I can remember when they came across the school loud system and announced that the president had been shot. We didn't know the status at that point, and we were let out of school, and it was you could feel it. At 10 years old, you knew, you were certainly old enough to know that something terrible had happened to the nation.
All of this that comes back to us now, Doug, reminds us of that thing that we grappled with for a long time as to whether there was a conspiracy involved.